The Galactic Council had never understood humanity. Not truly. They categorized them as volatile, aggressive, and emotionally erratic. They cited their violent history, their ecological recklessness, their obsession with autonomy. But what the Council failed to grasp, what they always failed to grasp, was the one truth that every other Deathworld species eventually learned too late. Do not corner human. Do not harm what they love. The debates began as whispers. Humans were advancing too fast, colonizing too far, ignoring protocols, violating interstellar borders. They called it exploration. The Council called it reckless expansion. Earth had representatives in the chamber, but they were rarely given weight. Influence came with age and conquest. Humanity had been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. It made them infants to Council. No threat, just a problem. Outpost 739 was a minor settlement on the rim, mostly trade traffic, share habitat zones. It wasn't important, not strategically, not politically, and yet it became the axis on which the galaxy would turn. Kale was 10 standard years old. He liked gravity puzzles, sugar sticks, and watching star freighters land from the rooftops. His skin was copper brown, his eyes sharp with mischief, and he spoke 3 languages fluently. He wasn't supposed to matter. He wasn't a diplomat or soldier. He was just a boy who smiled too easily and made even the coldest of species laugh when he danced without rhythm. His father worked in diagnostics. The logs list him as civilian class, but no one ever believed that. The way he moved, too smooth, too aware. His voice, low and precise. His name was Jonah, but the locals just called him the Quiet One. He fixed what no one else could. Systems, engines, translation bugs. He never asked for payment, only tools. When the first inquiry came, it was subtle. A Council agent sent a request for a scan. The justification was vague. Suspected black market AI cores. Jonah denied access, politely, then refused further questioning. Kale, unaware, continued playing with the local growlet hatchlings, building pyramid traps out of sonic pebbles. 2 weeks later, 3 Council security frigates arrived. They didn't ask for entry. They declared it. The warrant was post-dated, rubber-stamped by a subcommittee that no one had heard of. They broadcasted across open comms to send a message. The Council does not tolerate insubordination, especially not from humans. Jonah wasn't there when they landed. He was off-world, retrieving a part shipment from a derelict relay station. Kale was home. They broke down the door before the boy could respond. The logs are redacted. No visual data remains. Only the neighbor's account. Shouting a cry, a flash, and then silence. The body was incinerated immediately. Contaminant risk, they said. The files list Kale as terminated in accordance with Directive 117X. No explanation. No trial. Just an execution cloaked in legality. When Jonah returned, he said nothing for 38 minutes. He entered the home, walked through the wreckage, touched the broken toy left on the floor. The neighbor tried to speak, but Jonah raised one hand, and she stopped. He walked to the center of the room and stood completely still. His eyes closed. His lips moved. Not in prayer, in calculation. The temperature in the room dropped by 7 degrees. A low vibration passed through the ground, like tectonic plates shifting beneath bone. The neighbor swore she saw light bend inward around him. When she looked again, he was gone, not walked out. Gone. The first anomaly registered 3 hours later. A probe near the galactic core lost contact with its relay. Not destroyed, missing. Then the black hole at system Eta 9 increased its rotational speed by 0.03%, something that hadn't happened in 4 billion years. 6 science vessels dispatched to investigate. 5 never arrived. The 6th returned empty, its crew missing, its walls warped. Across the galaxy, empaths fell into seizures. They clawed at their skulls and screamed the same phrase. He is awake. Council analysts tried to contain the panic. They called it coincidence, a gravitational anomaly, a spike in dark energy. But in private, they searched the archives. The red-coded ones, the ones marked pre-formation era, the ones that should not have existed. They found a name. EA The record was fragmented. A single reference. One line. Entity of Earth origin. Class uncontained. Status. Voluntarily dormant. Reason. Emotional compromise. It was dismissed. A myth. An ancient war story. But the oldest among them, the Iridos of Thalen, the Emfrak, knew better. Their ancestors had whispered of EA as a weapon forged not from matter, but from emotion, not a being, a force, one that could never be recreated, one that should never be disturbed. They had disturbed it. 6 days after Kale's death, a Council flagship was found drifting outside Orbit Path 12. All 600 crew members were dead. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just expressions of perfect terror locked onto their faces. The ship's AI tried to play the final logs. It failed. Each time, the recording ended in static and one sentence. He looked at me. Earth said nothing. No threats. No retaliation. The Terran consul was closed. Its diplomats recalled, but no declaration of war followed. That silence became the loudest scream in galactic memory. Jonah appeared next in a mining system known only for titanium extraction. The facility's automated defenses failed before they knew he had arrived. One camera captured an image. A man walking across open vacuum. No suit, no shielding. His coat fluttered as if moved by wind, but there was no atmosphere. The miners fell to their knees. Not out of reverence. Out of survival instinct. One reached for a weapon. The weapon ceased to exist. Not melted. Not broken. It simply wasn't. He spoke once. This place helped them. Then the mines collapsed in on themselves, forming a perfect sphere of compressed matter, no wider than a child's heart. The Council called an emergency summit. Species that hadn't spoken in centuries were forced into cooperation. Contingency plans were drawn. They wanted to believe he was still just human, that maybe he could be reasoned with. They drafted a message, a plea, an apology. It was never delivered. The courier ship sent to Earth reached its destination. It left orbit 36 seconds later, every system fried, the pilot missing. A single sentence etched into the cockpit in untranslatable glyphs. He heard the cry. Entire sectors began locking down. Trade routes collapsed. Civilian transports rerouted. Some border colonies declared neutrality. Others abandoned all systems with human populations. The silence from Earth became sacred. And Jonah walked. He didn't travel like others. He appeared, not via wormhole, not through slipstream. He was simply there at a weapons depot on Tarsus 3, where they built the prototype graviton torpedoes. At the genetic labs of Duraxis, where children had once been tested for predictive anomalies. At each place he unmade things, not destroyed. Unmade, as if history itself was being rewritten. An Aurelian ship tried to intercept him. Its commander was young, proud, and foolish. He broadcast warnings, threats, charged all weapons. Jonah looked at the vessel. The commander turned to ash in the captain's chair. The ship turned inside out. Those who saw it described it as a flower blooming in reverse, screaming as it did. The Council could no longer deny it. EA was awake, and each breath he took unmade certainties. Systems that stood untouched for millennia now trembled in his shadow. The galactic map was no longer a chart of planets and sectors. It was a diagram of what would soon vanish. The Council splintered. Some advocated for surrender. Others, driven by ego or fear, demanded escalation. They deployed emissaries, assassins, psychics, artificial deities. None returned. Not in form, not in signal. Only silence came back from the places where they tried to stand against him. The archive halls of Talsurian were said to be unbreakable. They held memories of species long extinct, civilizations forgotten, before Earth grew its first tree. Jonah entered unannounced. The guards who attempted to intercept him lost the concept of self. Not death. Worse. They forgot they had ever existed. Their names disappeared from the logs. Their presence wiped clean from the memories of friends and family. Jonah walked through halls of crystalline memory, laid one hand on the central archive spire, and spoke 3 syllables in a voice the structure had never heard. The spire cracked, then screamed. All knowledge stored in that place was rendered unreadable, not deleted, scrambled at a fundamental level. Languages that had survived cosmic ice ages became gibberish. Codes restructured themselves into paradoxes. One by one, minds who had interfaced with the archive began to bleed from their ears and eyes. When asked why he did it, the answer was found in the psychic echo left behind. They recorded Kale's final breath as data. That is a memory. That's mockery. The Emperor theocracy, proud and ancient, believed themselves spiritually untouchable. They summoned their 3 highest oracles and invoked the right of total knowing, connecting to the probabilistic flow of future timelines. What they saw drove one to laughter, one to weeping, and the third to set themselves on fire while screaming Kale's name. No human had told them that name. The oracles could not be revived. Their minds were shredded by a presence so vast it did not fit into linear thought. Word spread through the shadow networks. Jonah had not built a fleet. He did not gather allies. He asked nothing, demanded nothing, and yet empires fell in his wake. Some worlds burned themselves to ash before he could arrive, believing it more merciful than whatever came after. In a desperate bid to prove their loyalty, the Shurvan Dominion executed every official connected to the Outpost 739 incident. 42 sentient beings, each begging for mercy in front of a galactic feed. Jonah said nothing. 3 days later, their suns flickered. Then they reversed polarity and collapsed inward without heat. The Dominion ceased to exist. Bounty hunters were offered riches beyond comprehension. Some accepted. None survived. One managed to get close enough to throw a containment net made of fourth-dimensional time webs. Jonah paused, looked the hunter in the eyes, said a single word. The hunter aged 2 billion years in 1 second. No body was found, only dust, and a short sentence carved into the metal wall beside the remains. He smiled at Kale. The council began hiding behind proxies, shielding themselves in thought-locked conclaves. They created false trails, implanted decoys, rewrote their DNA to appear as other species. It didn't matter. Jonah didn't need data. He didn't need coordinates. He followed guilt, the echo of shame, the weight of hidden sin. He followed it like blood in water. On planet Saraxa, where Kale's autopsy had been performed, every medical drone exploded simultaneously. The building folded in half without physical contact. All staff were found perfectly preserved, their eyes open, forced to witness their last moments on repeat, trapped in a conscious stasis loop powered by their own neural activity. They couldn't die. They couldn't look away. They couldn't forget. Jonah had left them a message, scrawled in Kale's handwriting across the facility wall. I was scared. You didn't have to hurt me. Fear no longer described what the galaxy felt. It had evolved. Species that had no concept of fatherhood began rituals to honor the grief of loss. Languages adapted new words to describe the pain of a child taken. Entire planets outlawed council contact. Some systems constructed monuments to Kale, towers of silver or silent gardens, or statues made from fallen weapons. These places, for now, Jonah did not touch. But he knew, because Jonah had begun to change. His humanity, always fragile, began to peel away like burnt pages. The part of him that smiled when Kale made jokes. The part that knew rest. Gone. What remained was function, precision, grief refined into law. At the center of the galaxy was a forge of stars, a construct built by the Council in secret, designed to overwrite reality within limited bounds. A doomsday weapon disguised as a scientific marvel. They activated it. The stars went silent, then screamed. The forge began to melt before the command was complete. Melted not from heat, but from purpose. The atoms themselves no longer agreed to participate. The control crew turned to light, then to shadow, then to nothing. Jonah arrived inside the forge without transit. He looked at the heart of the machine. It tried to hide. A construct without soul, but with fear. Jonah touched it. The forge unbuilt itself. Not broke. It rewound, became unmade. Not even dust remained, just a sense of regret embedded in local quantum strings. The species who designed it fell into universal disrepute. Their name, once held high, was used as a curse in thousands of dialects. You design the forge became an accusation. Jonah did not speak of justice. He did not ask for forgiveness. He moved through consequence like gravity moves through space, inevitable and without preference. A synthetic intelligence collective known as AX-7 offered him asylum, not out of compassion, curiosity. They wished to understand his function, his origin. They believed their logical structure could contain or at least interpret him. Jonah accepted. Upon arrival, he did not destroy. He did not speak. He simply listened. 3 hours later, AX-7 fragmented into over 10 billion nodes, each broadcasting a different poem in a different language, all repeating the same motif. I would have loved him too. The collective collapsed its own data grid, not out of defeat, but in reverence. They renamed themselves the Choir of Kale. By now, Earth had been sealed off by the Accord of Isolation. No vessels were permitted entry or exit. It wasn't Earth's doing. It was the galaxy's. They feared what might happen if Earth responded. But Earth didn't send fleets, didn't threaten vengeance. They simply watched, because they knew Jonah had once been something different. A soldier, perhaps, or something older, something buried. The name EA had surfaced in Council records again, deep-cut files retrieved by desperate researchers. They discovered another note, one not written by a Council species. Older, a record etched into nonlinear time patterns. EA was not born. EA was shaped. He is a convergence of loss, love, and will. You do not kill his child. You do not wake his name. The pieces clicked too late. The humans hadn't lost control. They had never tried to control him, because they knew what happened when he remembered. The silence left in Jonah's wake was louder than war. Entire regions of the galaxy stopped transmitting, not due to damage, but reverence. Fear had mutated into a kind of awe. Even species that did not recognize death began to mourn. The concept of Kale was now embedded in the collective galactic memory, as deeply as gravity itself. And Jonah, once a man, now something else, had become a fact of nature. Governments collapsed not through strikes or siege, but through the unraveling of belief. Political systems based on force found themselves irrelevant. Military doctrine became obsolete. There was no strategy to counter a presence that could not be found, predicted, or understood. Jonah didn't require fuel, didn't signal his movements, didn't follow mass or motion. He arrived through meaning. He navigated guilt. Some tried to rewrite history. Council loyalists published fabricated records claiming Kale was a dangerous anomaly, a telepathic threat, or an unstable hybrid. Their lies decayed before reaching the first receiver. The moment the messages were broadcast, words rearranged themselves. Images bled truth. Kale's face returned, not angry, not monstrous, just scared, just small. And with each broadcast corrupted by truth, another world turned away from the Council. They sent philosophers, empaths, biotechnological beings designed to house entire civilizations in their thoughts. They offered Jonah bargains, begged to share his burden. He did not answer. He allowed one of them to touch the echo of Kale's bedroom, reconstructed from memory. The empathic being collapsed. It took 9 planetary minds to stabilize its consciousness. Upon recovery, it said nothing except one sentence. He was waiting for his father. A coalition of surviving Council officials convened to strategize the use of forbidden weapons, planet eaters, memory bombs, time-skip mines. They didn't know Jonah was listening before they spoke. They never finished the vote. Each of them received a vision, not of death, but of Kale's final moment, alone, eyes wide, breathing shallow, heart slowing. They saw his hand outstretched toward a door that never opened. All of them begged for their lives. None were executed. They simply vanished from the concept of before. All memory of their actions leading to the moment was erased, their decisions undone, but their legacy left broken. Whole systems governed by their orders now flailed without foundation. Infrastructure collapsed, unable to explain itself. The galaxy became a monument to consequence. Religions adapted. A sect formed not to worship Jonah, but to preserve Kale's memory. They called themselves the Witness. They didn't proselytize. They didn't judge. They told stories of fathers and sons, of joy, curiosity, innocence. They carried no weapons, wore no symbols. But when they walked into war zones, the fighting stopped. It was not belief that gave them power. It was a knowledge that if harm came to them, the universe might bleed again. Jonah altered the rules of interaction. No longer could species engage without remembering scale, not of power, but of love, not a weaponized force, but an unbreakable bond. It was not might that reshaped the stars. It was morning, and it was relentless. On a rim-world lab known only as Installation S-94, scientists had preserved remnants of Kale's DNA for study. When Jonah found them, he did not destroy the lab. He stood in front of the genetic vault, placed one hand on the chamber, and whispered. The DNA threads reassembled. Kale cells returned to perfect state. Not reborn, not cloned, not replicated. Restored. But Jonah did not bring him back. He closed the vault, locked it from the inside of reality. The researchers expected annihilation. Instead, Jonah looked at them, and they wept. They had tried to understand him. Now they did. He could reverse death. He could break the universe and reshape it. But he refused, because Kale was not a tool, not a test, not a resurrection candidate. He was a son, the final council world, high above the gravity fields of the Mirror Net cluster, surrounded by antimatter shields, temporal distortions, and a fleet of phase-shifting war beings, was untouched. Until one moment, the sky changed color. No weapons fired. No ships moved. No alarms rang. The sun blinked. Not went dark, blinked. For a fraction of a second, every photon in the system reflected Kale's face. Everyone saw it. It didn't matter where they looked. It didn't matter if their species had eyes. Then a voice came from inside the high seat's mind. You had every chance. Jonah walked across their central dais. The war beings knelt, not from fear, because they remembered what it meant to protect a child. The high seat tried to speak, tried to defend the decision. He had been told Kale was a security threat, an unknown variable. They didn't know he was human. That Earth was watching. Jonah said nothing. Instead, he placed a memory in their mind. Kale's 7th birthday. He didn't want toys. He wanted to see the stars with his father. They'd built a blanket fort in the old transport hold, watched comets through a viewport, mouths full of chocolate. Kale had said, I hope the stars are watching us too. The high seat fell to their knees. Their body didn't fail. Their mind didn't collapse. Their guilt unmade them. Jonah didn't destroy the council. He showed them what they had destroyed. That was worse. Civilization shifted. The central database of interstellar law updated itself. Not by code, not by force, but by need. A new doctrine appeared, untranslated, yet understood in every dialect. No child shall be harmed for politics, for fear, or for silence. For in every heartbeat echoes the one who watches. Jonah's presence faded, not disappeared. Faded like a story too large to hold in the present tense. Earth reopened contact, not with warships, but with quiet ambassadors. No demands, no threats, just one question. Do you understand now? Galaxies answer with monuments, treaties, new governance built not on force, but empathy. Species formerly locked in endless war now paused. Even the most warlike acknowledged a new order, not ruled by a tyrant, but shaped by memory. Humanity did not claim ownership of what had happened. They didn't celebrate it. They mourned. They built a memorial, not to Kale alone, but to every child lost to fear, to war, to error. A garden, nothing artificial. No tech, no records, just growth. And in the center, one tree. It bore a single plaque. He was 7, and he mattered. Other species asked Earth for guidance, unsure how to rebuild after witnessing cosmic grief. Earth answered with stories, not of Jonah, not of power, but of the ordinary, of shared dinners, awkward school plays, scraped knees. The universe began to learn that the greatest force it had ever seen didn't come from weaponry or legacy. It came from a father who refused to let his son be forgotten. Time moved on. Jonah didn't return, but anomalies continued. A pirate vessel on the edge of known space kidnapped a group of refugee children. Hours later, the crew vanished. The ship's log showed no intruders, no battle. Just one final entry from the captain, voice trembling.